I was talking on the phone the other day with a man who said that he was dating a woman, and he said, when I share things with her, I don't have the same sense of freedom and being loved as when I share the same thing with you, meaning me. He said, why is that? When you share things with me, the relationship is very clear. You're calling to get loved. I'm functioning as the wise person, although we don't say that at the beginning of the call. Everybody's crystal clear on that subject. And so my job is to love and teach you, mostly love. And it's a one-way flow. I love you. And you know that. You know that I don't need you to do anything for me to love you. So, very clear. Dating isn't as clear. It is not a wise person call. It is not one way. So when you talk to this woman on the phone, there's three things going on simultaneously, and just one would be enough to confuse you. Actually, 6 things. You are learning to love her. And at the same time, she is learning to love you. You are also learning if you can love her as a potential future partner. And she's learning whether she can unconditionally love you. And you're gathering information about her, her peculiarities, her tastes, her hobbies, her ability to listen, her teachability, and so on. And she's gathering the same information about you. So there are at least 6 functions that are going on in a conversation between you two, and they relate to each other. So they're not independent. They're not separable. It's not completely understood. It's not stated at the beginning of the conversation. So you're right. You wouldn't get the same clean feeling of getting loved. So at the very least, you could say at the outset of the call, look, we're just practicing. We're practicing these 3 things. Learning to love, seeing if we can love, and gathering information about the other person, and make it clear that it's not a wise person call. That'll help. And it still gets fuzzy. In a committed relationship, unconditional love is harder to do because there's so much, in a partnership, so much required cooperation. And the cooperation can look very much like trading, even if it's not. There's a back and forth. And so that could muddy the mind about how unconditional it is. That's all. It's just the way it is. And you practice and you learn to do it better and better. Janine called me, and separate subject, she was crying. She was feeling bad about herself at work, at home, in her family. She was eating too much. She was watching movies to escape. It was just going on and on with tears and blowing her nose, and she was just feeling terrible. And I finally said, stop. And she kept going for a little bit, so I had to repeat stop several times. And so she finally heard me and stopped, and I said, you're just forgetting. You're forgetting I love you. You're forgetting God loves you. You're forgetting that just with that alone, not to mention the many other enormous blessings in your life, you're going to be okay. And then more tears. But now, because shoot, once you start complaining, it's just like rolling a rock down a hill. She said, but now I've gone so far backward. It's not enough that she's feeling terrible. Now she has to feel terrible about feeling terrible. Oh, I don't know how you do all feel terrible about feeling terrible, but she's working on it. Ridiculous. So I described a difficulty that she had recently had with a crisis. She knew the crisis that I was talking about and how she had handled it. And then I said, and I've known you for a couple of years now, and I know how you handled a similar crisis a couple of years ago. And the difference is huge. You have learned a lot just in the last couple of years. So no, you're not going backward. You just stumbled, buried your face in the asphalt, perhaps. What do you do after a stumble? You just get up. You just get up and keep walking. Now, you can stop in the middle of the race, and in addition to getting up, stop and cry about it, but it doesn't move you forward any. She said, so why do I worry about going backward? Not content just to feel loved, she's still asking questions, worry questions. Because if you do, if you feel like you are going backward, you hear the whole world saying to you, are you kidding me? After all we've done for you and how we've taught you and all the love we've given to you, you've thrown it all away and you've gone back to eating with the pigs. And then, of course, comma, you moron. That's why you do this to yourself. You can't just make a mistake and learn about it. You then have to feel bad about it because you hear the whole world telling you that you're worthless when you make mistakes. That's something you can change because you can just listen to different people. You can listen to me tell you that I don't care that you made a mistake. I don't care at all. And sometimes we just have bad days, really. One of the more common questions I hear when people call feeling bad is, why? Why did this happen? Why am I doing this? One lady today tried to ask me why in at least a half a dozen different ways by avoiding the word why. I said, I don't ask why questions anymore. It doesn't help. The question is, what are we going to do next? So, for what reason do you think? She went through half a dozen of those. It was very creative. Sometimes it's just a bad day. Just see them. Just learn how you want to be and make decisions that will move you in that direction. Just move on. We waste far too much time grieving, feeling stupid, and asking why. New subject. Our 19-year-old daughter lives with us, and she's preparing to go to college. Because of our failures as parents, she never really learned to take responsibility for her belongings, and so her room is just a disaster. It looks like a landfill. The consequences that I set up for her having a landfill of a room seem to have no effect. Without controlling or violating her right to choose, is there any way that I can help her get her things in order? She's spending all her time studying or on her smartphone or watching television, but somehow she also needs to learn to keep her things in order, or it's going to be difficult to succeed in school and in life. Well, there's a couple of different ways you could see this, so I'm going to give them both to you. One is at 19 and she's about to go to school. If we're talking about months from now, you're too late. If she's going to be a pig at school, she's going to be a pig at school, but very likely she's going to have a roommate. And I can tell you, most roommates won't be as charitable as you have been. I've had roommates, I've heard some really horrible roommate stories. One kid who was in our dorm who refused to bathe, and his parents had tried to get him to bathe. And we're talking about a serious body odor problem. And once a week or so, all of the guys on the dorm floor would just come into his room and he'd start screaming. We would just strip all of his clothes off. We'd take him into the shower and we'd scrub him from head to toe with not Brillo pads. That would be kind of cruel, but those plastic, scouring pads. He says, I hate it that you do this. Then take a bath. Well, eventually he learned. So that would be one way to deal with this. But let's say that she's not going to be gone from your home for a while. You said she's preparing to go to college, which doesn't make it sound like she's leaving in the next 5 minutes. She's 19 years old. And preparing to go to college and living at home, it's not her home, it's yours. And she's not, so change the way you see it. She's not a child with her room anymore. If she were 17 years old and going to high school, I'd say, oh, screw it, you're too late. You didn't teach her, so you blew your chance. But 19 and going to spend another year with you? Nah, not her house. She's now a boarder who's living in your room and in your house. So she has to live according to your standards. I know lots of people who live in individual rooms in boarding houses, and the landlord tells them exactly how clean they have to keep their room and the kitchen and everything else, or he throws them out. Simple. So if she doesn't have the room completely cleaned by your standards by X time, and you have to be incredibly specific, like 12:03 p.m. On, what are we in, whatever date, or by a certain day each week, then you'll start removing things like her smartphone, which I'd be willing to bet, from what you told me, that you pay for, or the door to her room, and then her room, as in you lock her room and she can sleep on the couch, or she can sleep outside in a tent. I've seen several children go to the tent option before they caught on, and then she can just leave the house. So you get to teach, you get to choose to teach her however you wish. At age 19, she's not going to learn from your words. She's going to learn from consequences. I got a follow-up email like 3 weeks later, and the mom said that she said, my daughter really hated this at first. Yelled, screamed, cursed at us, said bad words, but she now has a clean room. Apparently she's taking some sort of preparatory classes before she goes to college. Her grades have improved. She's doing her chores around the house, and she's being polite and cooperative. Well, I'll be darned. And all because you finally had the courage to take a stand. Children blackmail their parents. No kidding. They blackmail them with the fear of disapproval. And if we show the slightest concern for their disapproval, we're screwed. We're useless. We can't really be their parents. Here's somebody who says, today I learned that something that really helps me when I get stuck in my little dark chipmunk hole is to just actually do something. Like in the Nike commercials. Just do it. Sometimes even talking about it isn't helpful to me. It keeps me in my head, so I just keep spinning and fighting and holding on to the misery. Tonight, my husband was needy and clean, and because I was empty myself, I wasn't very kind in the way that I pushed him away. So I called my wise woman and complained about how it's so draining for me to be around my husband. Now that I'm sane again, I see how insane it is to say something like that. It's almost a little funny now that I think of it. What helped me get out of my hole was when my wise person said, I'm not willing to listen to any more complaints about your husband. I will not participate in your self-destruction. Isn't that such a wonderfully loving thing to say? So, did you hear that? Her wise person said, I'm not going to listen to you complain anymore because it's killing you. And she responded with gratitude. Sometimes people are annoyed when they call me, I didn't call them. They call me and they say, I'm having this terrible trouble in my relationship. And I say, well, it's because you're being selfish. And they say, how could you talk to me so harshly? Honey, it's the ultimate proof that I care about you that I would tell you this. How many of your friends tell you that you're selfish as a spouse? Well, none of them. Right. That's why you keep them as friends. Why in the world would I tell you something I know you'd hate unless I really cared about you? Because I know you're going to hate me for saying it. Sometimes that gets through, sometimes not. So, yes, your wise person was perfect for you. She continues. It's like when you say to me that you'll slap me if I indulge in my fear and doubt. Please, I'm joking. I sometimes tell people if I could and it would wake you up, I'd come through the phone and slap you in the side of the head. But notice I say, if it would do any good, I would, but obviously I can't. So that comment got me thinking. And then my wise person said, so what are you going to do? take some wild guesses and just get moving. So I got moving, and I apologized to my husband. I apologized to my son for having been crazy, and it felt so good. In fact, turns out I didn't really even care how they would have responded. It just felt good for me to apologize and say the truth. And it turns out that they both happened to be very forgiving. But it doesn't matter. I'd have been happy to apologize anyway. There is a relief in being wrong. We can always find a way to blame somebody else for how we're feeling. Always, because people make so many mistakes. But as she says, it was the decision to act, to apologize, and admit my mistakes that helped me the most. It's empowering to think that I can do something about a situation rather than dwell on how terrible things are. It gets me thinking about how to get out of the hole instead of complaining about where I am. I'm happy that solutions exist. I just got off the phone with a couple less than 30 minutes ago. And she was sitting there with her partner, future husband, fiance. I can't remember exactly where they are in that continuum, which gets increasingly confusing with passing years. And she was complaining that apparently at some point I had said to him, well, she's not being very teachable. I tried to say to her that the one quality that I've seen that determines whether a couple succeeds is whether they're teachable, whether they're willing to learn something. But I didn't get a chance to do that because for the next 8 minutes straight, without interruption, she contradicted every sentence I spoke to her, every sentence she read that I'd written to her, and every sentence that he spoke. That's kind of impressive, to not agree with a single thing that anybody says in 8 minutes, which is some kind of crazy rightness. I mean, that's just insane. And I finally pointed it out to her. You realize that in the last 8 minutes, you haven't been wrong one time. And that's the very definition of not being teachable. It was too easy. What did she say? No. And proceeded to tell me how it hadn't been 8 minutes, it had only been 7. There's an enormous relief that comes from just saying, I was wrong. And if somebody says, you were wrong at a level of 6 out of 10, and you happen to have video proof that it was 4 out of 10, does it really matter? If you were wrong and you were unloving, isn't it still wrong and unloving? Does it really matter how much? Do we get credit? In fact, she actually said, don't I get credit for the right things I do? Not really, no. When you're driving drunk and you smash into an oncoming car and you kill a mother and 3 children and they send you off to jail, they don't, on the way to jail, give you an award for the 5 years that you drove without getting in an accident. No, there are some things that in our lives and in our relationships we have to eliminate. And being right and being defensive and being angry, those are several of them. New subject. I know a lady who piddled around in real love and for a good while, and then she began to take it seriously. She did an intervention. In fact, she became like a different person to the point where I'm not kidding you. I'm looking at her going, where's your twin? She was that different. She was less afraid. She was more confident. So she did what I suggested. She just kept loving. She just kept practicing. And she was living with a man who had absolutely no interest in unconditional love at all. None. So she did what I suggested. She loved him. She did that for months. She touched him. His response, nothing. She would talk to him about things that, she thought he cared about. His response, nothing. No matter what she did, he stayed the same kind of formless, lifeless blob. He had no clue. Now, some of you are guessing at who this is, and you're wrong. because it's somebody you don't know. And there are too many partners like this for you to know anyway. This describes too many people. So what to do in a situation like this? Her whole life has changed. He's doing absolutely nothing, and they're married. So she kept loving him and kept loving him for months. And then finally she said, I'm starting to feel hopeless. So I suggested that she asked him if he wanted to stay married. And his response was, I guess so. Imagine, do you want to stay married to me? I guess so. In other words, no, not if it costs me anything. So she suggested some things that they could do to improve their marriage. Read the marriage book together, get a coach. His answer was no to all of them. So she finally said, well, I'm not satisfied with what we have. We're barely roommates. Barely. Roommates see each other more often than we do and talk more, and they're nicer to each other. So I don't see any options. Either we do something or we get divorced. He just didn't care. He said, nah, I went to therapy once, and so I've tried that and I'm done with all that. So she elected to leave. And we talked often about the loss of her marriage. And sometimes, understandably, she would cry. So I would ask her, what are you crying about? What are you grieving? What are you losing? It's naturally upsetting, and it sounds like a really obvious question when you ask somebody who's getting divorced, why are you upset? But the question is still important. Why? Because she couldn't easily answer the question. First time I said, so what are you losing exactly? And her eyes got wide because she's used to seeing people who are going through divorce just cry and then everybody sympathizes. Sympathy doesn't help anybody, really. She couldn't answer the question. So I made just a suggestion. I said, you feel like you're losing something though, don't you? You're grieving something through her tears. Yes, I do. But what? What are you losing? Are you losing love? No, because you've never had it in this relationship, ever. Not from the first 2 weeks you were married. She couldn't name what she was grieving. So in this case, it can sometimes be very helpful to help identify people what they're losing. I said, you're losing your dreams of what might have been, but they're just dreams. Your whole marriage has been an illusion that you've created, that somehow, someday you'd wake up one morning and he'd look over at you and with tender eyes and say, I just couldn't live without you. But now you don't have that illusion. You can't hide it anymore. So you've lost all hope that your dream might be real. And losing hope is real. But now the truth is, you're finally free to be yourself, to find love with a partner, potentially. And she wrote, we've been going through this for several weeks, but she wrote and she said, today was a decent day. My husband, Fred, helped me to go pick up a small island for the kitchen and a small entertainment center for the new place where I'm moving. He bought me lunch. We got his name off my bank account. He wanted to keep me on his bank account, which I thought was strange, but I said, okay. But I've had tears off and on today because, again, all of this makes it more real. Yeah, each step peels away the illusion, peels away the dream. What do you think women are doing when they're pouring through wedding albums and magazines and looking at all these pictures of white dresses? It's not about the dresses. It's about the dream. Now, he's offered to pay her a monthly alimony. He's offered to do this without an attorney so that they don't have to fight about it. He's offered part of his pension. She even said, well, now, I don't want to take any part of his pension. Oh, yeah, you really do. After being married as many years as you have been, yeah, you really do want to accept his offer. And she said, but I don't understand all this. He's always been cheap with his money before, and now here he is helping me buy furniture, offering money, offering me part of his pension. I don't get it. It's because deep down he knows this marriage in great part has failed because of him. He knows deep down, although he can't articulate quite exactly how, that he hasn't been loving. This is the one way he knows how to love you, is to give you money. He's been helping her pack. He sat next to her while she cried while she was packing. He's helped with moving expenses, and it confuses her. No, he's just doing the best he can do. It makes him feel better about himself. He knows he's been selfish about all this, and helping you move makes him feel less crappy. She wrote, "He's been nice today and came and sat beside me one time while I cried. He has no idea what to do. He just sat next to me. But he did his best in that moment, and I thanked him later for that." So keep remembering this, kid. He's done the best he could for all the years you've been together. He's doing the best he can do now. Now, could he have agreed to do something in real love with you? Could he have agreed to take another step to learn to be loving? Maybe, but none of us has the right to say that. None of us has any knowledge of how terrified he is of change, or whether he's capable of even facing it. So much more productive to just say he's doing the best he can. You continue. "As the evening progressed, I became more emotional. I've been crying more and more, and I feel like there's something wrong with me. He'd rather go out of his way to make sure I'm comfortable in a new place than having any interest in saving our marriage." Yeah, good. You're getting this then. So just remember this and don't try to change it. He does not know how to be a husband. And he doesn't want to learn. He's frozen in fear, but he does know how to pick up boxes. So he's offering you what he's got. He can pick up boxes, so let him. He knows how to write a check, so let him. It's the biggest gift he's got to offer. He doesn't know how to offer himself. For one thing, he doesn't know who himself is. You say it's become really clear that he's just been waiting for me to be the one to leave, that he's never really even wanted to be part of this. I feel like an idiot. Yeah, you were an idiot. You were an idiot when you chose him because you didn't have the sense to know what loving looked like. Now you're not an idiot. You're living a new life on a new planet, and he's chosen to stay behind on the old one. That's sad, but nothing to keep grieving over. Finally, you say, "I feel like, could there not be something wrong with me? He reminded me that he wants to stay friends." Well, then why wouldn't he want to be married to me? So there's got to be something wrong with me. Nah, you got to stop that like now. Stop it. I mean it. You're not divorcing because there's something wrong with you. He simply doesn't know who he is. He doesn't know how to be a partner. To be fair, you didn't know how to pick him as a partner in the beginning either. He doesn't know how to love. He doesn't know anything emotional. So a relationship becomes impossible. You're trying to have a loving relationship with a tree stump. Let it go. The divorce is simply acknowledging how things really are instead of living the lie that you've had all this time. Just let it be that. Let it be an acknowledgement as opposed to seeing it as abandoning him. You two separated years and years ago. You're just finally recognizing it. So we're going to change the subject from divorce and horrible things. We're going to talk about Sylvie for a second. So Sylvie's mother said, this has been, I think, a year and a half ago. How old's Bonnie? They keep changing their ages. They're very inconsiderate. So more than a year ago, Sylvie's mother said they have a playroom where the kids can kick balls, throw things. It's kind of a conversion of their garage, so they can't really hurt anything. And it was getting chaotic with all the balls flying all over the place, so it got to be a little overstimulating and a little scary for the youngest, Bonnie, who was just 10 months old. You can imagine at 10 months when you get hit with a ball, it just sort of knocks you across the floor. So she fled out of the room to find me and climbed into my arms. And shortly thereafter, Sylvie noticed that Bonnie wasn't there. So she came in and found us both, and she said, "How sweet. Bonnie feels loved by you." Can't imagine saying such a tender thing at that age myself. The other day, Sylvie made 2 hearts, like, I guess, out of paper. She gave one to her father. She said, "You can take this to work with you so that when you see it, you can remember me. And I'll keep this one so I can remember you." Imagine growing up like that, where remembering that you're loved is so important and you've learned so much about it that you realize that it's the most important thing that there is. Hard to imagine, but there are little 4-year-old kids who've got this. I used to hear from a woman, new subject, almost every day about how awful her life was. Her relationships, her job, everything. Just everything was just awful, awful, terrible, terrible. And one day I said, "Nope." I said, "I refuse to hear you say one more word until you can tell me what you're grateful for." Why? No, not to be positive, because your story is one-sided. It's selective. It's not truthful, because you're only telling me the things you don't like. So I want to hear the rest of the truth. I want to hear the things that are working in your life. Now, it's understandable that we focus on the things that are bad, because in the famous words of the eminent philosopher Vince Scully, he was a sportscaster, he said, "Losing feels worse than winning feels good." Painful events are almost always more memorable than pleasurable ones. So we tend to complain about our pain more. So she waited for a couple of days. And she wrote back and she said, "I'm grateful for love, God, you, finally having some direction in my life. I know what a wise choice looks like now. I'm grateful that you called this morning, that you texted me later to see how I was doing, that no matter how ridiculous, stubborn, or dim-witted I am, you still call and write and text me and teach me and love me. I'm grateful I have a job. I'm grateful that because of this job, I found real love, that I have a place to live, that I have a car, that I can sing and have fun during the day, that other people can sing and play music so I can listen and be uplifted. I'm grateful that gratitude feels pretty darned good, which I'd kind of forgotten. I'm grateful that I had the faith and courage to listen to you and others as you helped me change my life. I'm grateful for books and CDs and website pages and conference calls where I can go for wisdom about living. I'm grateful for knowing that I don't have to live in fear the rest of my life. For bicycle riding, running, swimming, dancing. I'm grateful for humility and my willingness to learn. I'm grateful that I don't live in prison anymore, that I have choices. For my grandmother and her prayers for me that I still remember. I'm grateful for my meager little wisdom. I'm amazed that I can even use the words my and wisdom in the same sentence. I'm grateful that I can sleep. I'm grateful for our puzzle table, that I know about nutrition and natural healing. I'm grateful for water, for the animals outside my window, even the bugs. I'm grateful for awareness, rainy days, flowers, trees, geckos, everything that has happened in my life that has brought me to where I am now. I'm grateful that no matter what happens, everything will always be okay. I'm grateful for prayer and meditation. That's a pretty cool list. Be a good list for us to listen to kind of every day. That's a lot of stuff. I might even suggest adding to it. Be grateful for all those things and the people who love you and prove by their love that you're completely, lavishly worthwhile. Now, maybe you didn't mean to leave that off, but I think you're not comfortable with being worthwhile enough yet to have put it on a list. That prove that your life is abundant. That the things you don't have are pretty small in comparison to what you do. That you have plenty of good and true thoughts to fill your mind with, pushing out all those lies and darkness, and that you have nothing to worry about. So stop filling your head with the lies, which is where worry comes from, and complaining. And fill your mind with the truth. Not what's positive, but what's true. Enjoy what you really have. That's what gratitude is. It's telling the truth about what we really have and enjoying it. It's not an attitude. It's telling the truth. All day, every day. Here's a lady who says, my son spent most of the evening on my lap while I sang to him and then on his father's lap while I played the piano. It was really sweet. When we were getting ready for bed, we realized that he was quite hot and he got very upset when he got into the bath. I thought he needed to drink fluids and we needed to take his temperature and start running around frantically getting those things ready. But then I saw that my husband was also getting tense because of the tension in the house. So I stopped, even though here's my son with a fever, put my arm on my husband's shoulder and I said, it's okay. We're not going to stress about this. And he took a deep breath and said, okay. That's a very big deal. In the middle of a stressful situation, you didn't just take care of the task. Now, see, it would have been so easy to be right here. We had to attend to my son's fever first. People love to say, when my child is in trouble, everything else goes by the wayside. No, you still have to pay attention to your partner. And the whole rest of the evening, she said, went beautifully. It didn't matter whether things went my way. We worked together as parents, as partners, to take care of our son. And it ended up being a beautiful experience instead of a frantic one. Love makes everything better. Everything. Here's somebody who writes, something's been bugging me for a bit, bugging me a bit now for a long time. I write to you almost every day. Sometimes I write a lot. She's talking to me. And I talk and I text with a wise person or two every day, sometimes several times a day. I'm a little scared that that's like weird, like kind of abnormal. I don't think a lot of people in real life do that. No, you're right. A lot of them don't. What you're doing is clinging like a child after a lifetime of not feeling loved. So what? Good for you. Now, for those who are listening, this clinging would not be healthy if she were not changing, if she were not learning, if she weren't becoming stronger, but she is. Her marriage is unrecognizably stronger. She's an increasingly confident mother. She has a spiritual life she never had before. She laughs at her mistakes. She drives 2 to 3 hours to group each week. Her life is changing. So it's got to be healthy clinging. She said, like, maybe I need to get a life for myself or something. Like normal people, you know, they're busy with normal things. The other day I picked up a member of my group, Frederica, and I told her that I Skyped with you every day before and after my intervention. And she said something like, oh, well, I wouldn't need to do that. As if it was something that only really troubled, sick people would need. And Frederica, who I know, needs the daily contact, but she's too afraid to do it. So in this particular case, on this particular subject, you're actually far ahead of her in getting what you need. You continue. Other people don't seem to need the love I do. They don't go to group as often or make calls as often, but I love going to group and talking with my wise woman, and I wouldn't miss it for anything. Maybe I'm just really, really needy or something. Maybe I'm a particularly empty person. Empty? Yeah, sometimes. Particularly empty. Maybe, maybe not, but so what? You deal with where you are. That's all you can do. You turn on your GPS and you want to get somewhere, the very first thing your GPS does is determine where you are. You can't make any meaningful progress using a GPS device unless it knows where you are first. You have to deal with where you are, wherever that is, and not feel bad about it. So good for you that you would get what you need, while other people, many other people, foolishly feel bad about it. Feel bad about where they are. So then they feel bad about getting what they need. They're afraid of getting what they need, ashamed of where they are, and so they're stuck. And then she concludes, today, I would never a year ago have imagined her saying this. She said, today was a perfect day. What would you give to be able to say that? And it wasn't based on the fact that there were no difficulties in her day. Today was a perfect day because she felt loved and loving. Pretty cool thing to be able to say. I knew a woman who, when I first met her, was one of the most profound victims I have ever known. Now, considering how many I've known, you can't imagine what a statement that is I just made. Everybody and everything was trying to ruin her life. The entire world and the surrounding universe was combining to screw her up. She actually made a living for several years by generating lawsuits to right the injustices that she saw around her. Not kidding. She'd win a lawsuit and she would use that money to go then generate the next lawsuit. She even said to me, quote, I live for justice. I couldn't resist. I said, so you'd rather have justice than peace or happiness? There wasn't even a pause. She said, yes, as though she were saying, wouldn't everybody? And then her life changed. She began to take real love seriously. She had an intervention. She began to feel loved. It was like watching somebody come out of a cocoon, like watching a butterfly be born. She was unrecognizable. Whereas before she was bitter. She had characteristically pursed lips. Negative energy just rolled off her like a black cloud. She'd become like a light. She just bubbles on Skype. And she said that she met with a friend the other day. I just learned this a few days ago, who she described as an enormous victim. Of course, I started smiling inwardly, if not outwardly. And she said that all her friend could say was, I was hurt, I was hurt, I was hurt. She said all of her friend's entire conversation boiled down to how she'd been hurt. And my friend, the one who used to be the world's greatest victim, said, is it possible that others are just doing their best and not trying to hurt you? No. Oh, no. I was hurt. Then my friend went on and she said, well, now, is it not possible that you also do things that hurt other people and that you expect them to just let it go? No. Oh, no. The things that they do to me are much, much worse. And my friend said to me, how sad it is that she's stuck in her victimhood, blind and alone. All she has to do is open her eyes and see the love available to her, and she would be happy. But she won't. And then she got a quizzical look on her face and she said, did I used to do this? And I said, honey, you were the queen of this. You were the empress of this. And no defense, none. She just burst into laughter and said, well, I'm sure glad I don't have to keep doing it for the rest of my life. We get an enormous reward from acting like victims. We do, or we wouldn't do it. We get all the attention, we get the lack of responsibility. Read the entire victim book, Real Love and Freedom for the Soul, if you want to read the advantages we get from victimhood. But we can't be happy, which outweighs all the advantages times 1,000. And this lady discovered that. She discovered what it's like to be happy. At the end of the conversation, she said, I would give everything I have to keep the sense of freedom that I now have. It's beautiful to get rid of victimhood. Carrying it around is just the burden of death. A lady called me to say that her very old cat, I don't remember how old, but she said very old, so those of you who have cats know roughly what that is, had died. And almost as old as her college-age daughter, so I don't know what cat years are compared to dog years, but old. So the daughter had lived with that cat from pretty close to birth, certainly from the beginning of her memories. She'd never known life without that cat. So she was pretty attached to the cat. And the cat died, and the mother called me to say that she was, feeling sad, understandably, after living with anything for 15, 16 years, and said that she had just buried the cat and just didn't want to feel alone. So we just sat there together on the phone. I just held her hand and whispered to her, and she felt less alone. And then eventually she said, I feel much better, and she hung up. And then she called back to say, oh, shoot. She said, my daughter's called from school, and she's asking questions like, so what if the cat dies? What does that mean? Where will she go? Really big philosophical questions, not to mention that kind of difficult questions to answer since the cat had already died. But the mother didn't have the courage to tell her that the cat was lying in a hole in the ground in the backyard. And she asked me, well, what do I do now? I said, relax, honey. You were just overwhelmed with your own sense of loss. You were grieving the cat. You were worrying about your daughter's grief, and you were just taken aback. You were surprised by the closeness of the call to the burial of the cat. So you just got emotionally stunned, like being, sort of zapped with a taser. And you lost your head briefly. You didn't know what to do. Lost your mind. So what? It just happens. We get overwhelmed and we make decisions that we would not make if we were calm and there was no wind blowing, no tornado outside the window. You just got confused. So nothing to worry about. So I suggested that she call her daughter back, like immediately, like right then, and not hide it anymore, and tell the daughter what had happened. So she did. She called and told her daughter, and then she wrote back and she said, I'm so grateful for the turnaround. Realizing that I had to call my daughter right back and tell her the truth that the cat had already died, I just got afraid of the intensity of her pain, her daughter's pain, and so I lied by omission, by not telling her what had happened, which is understandable. She continues, it was so cool how my daughter just said, well, okay then, and seemed grounded, seemed okay with it. Basically, I said, I was unloving and stupid just now when I didn't tell you the truth. And she said, I could feel on the phone the difference between us. There was instantly a connection of love. She could feel that. And we both immediately got off the field of death. I didn't make any excuses. She didn't attack me. There was none of that. It doesn't get much better, especially when dealing with literally death. Instead, we got to live in freedom and truth. Love conquers all, she writes. It really does. And you got to experience it firsthand. And for all of us who are listening, this is when you find out how powerful love is. And at moments like this of crisis, whether it's the death of a childhood cat, or it's the death of a member of the family, or loss of a job, or whatever, if we haven't prepared by getting and trusting and remembering love. If we haven't prepared, we'll reach out for that strength and it won't be there. I see this all the time. People have a crisis and they reach out for some sense of stability. Well, they haven't practiced any of the steps of finding love, so there's nothing to grab hold of. They're loose in the wind and thrown about and then further bruised. She continued. She said, that 1 minute on the phone with you, or 2 or whatever it was, really made all the difference. Thank you. Easy on my part. You were just afraid. And I wasn't. So I just helped you out of the water. I wasn't better. You were not defective. You just fell in the water, blown by the winds of circumstance and your own unsteadiness. And I just held my hand out because I wasn't feeling the wind. I wasn't in the circumstance. Finally, she concludes, how critical I have been of my own parents for their cowardice and lying. It's humbling to see myself do it and then get to think again and change my behavior. It's the coolest thing ever, getting my life straightened out. This is a pretty big wow little conversation, because in one conversation, we get to see illustrated change, courage, parenting, loving. Amazing. So I'm grateful that she wrote. Here's somebody who says, I have a 15-year-old girl that I'll see tomorrow. She's a counselor who blames herself for her younger brother's death by drowning, which happened a couple of years ago. So she's been emotionally dying in an internal jail. The child died because they were outside and she went in to ask her dad a question, who was painting a room in the house. And in those few minutes, any of you who've ever taken care of a kid, all you have to do is turn around and they've done something, fallen in the lake, run into the road. And in that couple of minutes, the kid drowned. So the lady who's the counselor said, any ideas how to approach this would be appreciated. I thought about pointing out, like you sometimes do, that one person did not survive, the brother, but her guilt is killing her too. So now 2 people are lost. Her parents, if she keeps grieving, will have lost 2 kids, not 1. But if she can be guided to understand that releasing this guilt will redeem something extremely valuable, would that help? I'd start with a question. How old was the brother? Just learn some more about the circumstances. How did he drown? It might make a difference in the way that you talk to him, whether she left him in a tub as a 6-month-old or he drowned by wandering out to a river. Not a big difference, but at least you're listening to her circumstance. You're listening to her pain. Regardless of what the answers are, it comes down to something like this. And I'm not telling you what to say. It would be something like this. Dear, your brother drowned. And that is a tragedy. But you were a kid. Just a kid. And very likely should never have been given the responsibility for the life of another child in the first place, especially if the kid's life was potentially in danger, near water or near a street. Are you kidding? For a young kid, young kids can't pay attention to their own lives, much less the life of a younger sibling. This is not your fault. We already have one tragedy, one lost life. You keep feeling guilty, you die too. And you certainly can't be happy. The tragedy is that your brother would not want you to be miserable as you're being now. He'd want you to be happy. The greatest memorial you could possibly give your brother is to live a full and happy life, not to lose yours mourning his. Don't choose to die for him. Live in honor of him. Live to rejoice that you ever knew him. If you feel bad about his dying, then at least it demonstrates you understand something about the joy of living. So you know how precious life is. His was precious, so's yours. So live yours. Something like that. And with absolute compassion and softly, gently, but confidently. She needs to feel the hand of somebody who isn't just crying tears for her. That's not going to help her. She's drowning. When you cry tears for her, you jump in the water with her. That doesn't help. Or sympathizes with her. Nope, still not a help. She needs a firm, non-tearful hand to reach out and put their hand around her and love her and help her gain some understanding possibly at the same time. New subject. I talked to a man who has been having more and more trouble at work. Marriage dissolved, disconnected from people, lives in his head. In other words, life heading downhill pretty much in every imaginable way. And he told me something about his childhood. And at some point he said, I'm finding it really difficult being at my present job because, see, in my past jobs, there's always somebody who would come along and just rescue me. And I was comfortable with that because when I was a kid, my parents always rescued me. They saved me from anything difficult. If I didn't turn in my homework assignment, they would write me an excuse and lie. If I didn't get an essay done, they'd write it for me and I'd turn it in. If I left something home, they'd bring it to the school. They saved me at every turn. So I never learned how to deal with difficulties. And the result is that now I'm a cripple. I don't know how to do things myself. I don't know how to think for myself. I don't know how to be responsible. I don't know how to be a partner. I feel lost. Now, I think he's trainable. From my conversation with him, I think he can learn how to do this. With some love and support, I think he can begin to make responsible decisions. But the price of his parents spoiling him is tragic because most people don't recover from that. Most don't. What's the message? Don't rescue your kids. I just had this conversation with him today, so it's strong in my mind. Don't do it. Many of us see parents rescue their children because, quote, well, I really love them and I want to save them from pain. Yeah, that's kind of like saving an athlete from the pain of training. In our desire to save our children from pain, we also save them from learning to deal with pain, which is going to be unavoidable for the rest of their lives. We make it so that they don't learn how to be responsible or strong because they never have to exercise their emotional or spiritual muscles. We just step in and save them. So it is not loving to rescue our children. We need to teach them. We need to love them. And sometimes we need to let consequences roll right over them so that they can learn how to deal with those consequences. Really great questions from people today. Thank you for sending them. I look forward to seeing you next week.